Kia ora toi oho mai. I'm Membere Khan Malak, the Student Past President, and this afternoon we're just going to do a interview session with Todd McClay, our National MP, who is our MP for Rotorua and the wider country of New Zealand. Kia ora, Todd.
Kia ora.
Nice to have you here this
Great
afternoon.
to be here, thank you. I need to correct you, I am the Member of Parliament for Rotorua, and the Rotorua electorate goes from Tipoki all the way down to Broadlands near Taupo and sort of the rural area between. I'm not the MP for the rest of the country. Someone else can have that job. I reckon I've got the best job here in Rotorua.
I'm just saying, my friend.
I don't know. I just think of all the problems everywhere else. I'll just deal with you here.
Kia ora, Todd. Thank you for coming on today, because we just want to get some views from you, how you feel about these particular questions, and be nice to get your feedback.
Sure.
The first one is, do you have any holiday fun plans planned?
Well, the answer is yes, but it doesn't really matter what I want to do, because I'm married and I've got 4 children, and they're not children anymore. The eldest is 20, the youngest is 14. So it doesn't matter what I want to do, they're going to make the decisions for me. But we normally do a few things. Through sort of Christmas, we try to spend a little bit of time together as a family. Part of my job as an MP means I am away quite a lot, and down in Wellington, and even when you are back here in the electorate at home, you're away from home quite a bit too. I mean, we were just talking before the camera came on, over the last sort of 13 or 14 hours or something, but more, I've done 8 hours worth of school prize givings at some of our senior school prize givings, which is really good to do. But what we try and do is maybe a bit of time at the beach, and if we can get the children, the kids in the car and drive off somewhere away from the devices, away from home and everything else, and we'll see.
But that's not an easy thing to do, though, is it?
Getting to
get them away from devices, because our young ones love their devices.
It's not so easy to get them to do anything, really. But no, they're really good. So the oldest boy, Joshua, is 20. He was a good student, but he decided he didn't want to go and study anymore, and he's in his second year of an apprenticeship to become a builder, which I think is just an excellent career. Not everybody has to go off and become an academic. We need more builders. It's a great career. The next one is 18, Sam. He's finishing level 13, year 13 this year, and wants to go off and study engineering in Canterbury. I have one that's about to finish year 12 this year, and he's had enough of school, which I can sometimes understand. I left in year 12 too, and we're talking through what he's doing. At the moment, he's having a look to come here next year.
Very
which would be great. And then I have a daughter who's 14 who has another 30 years education ahead of her.
Oh, well, you've got a long way ahead of you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Todd. How has the transition been from being in government to now? Well,
it's been a very interesting one. I've been the Member of Parliament for Rotorua for 10 years. I've been directly elected 4 times now, and in all of that time until the last election a year ago, I was in government. So I've only known being an MP as a government MP, and for half of that 10 years or 9 years I was a minister. So the transition hasn't been difficult, but what I've done is taken a bit of time to work out what type of opposition MP I want to be. So the word opposition sounds like you're opposing everything. Well, actually, I didn't go to Parliament to be negative about everything and say what only was going wrong. I went to fix things and make them better. And my first responsibility, forget Parliament, is here to the people of the wider Rotorua area. So I've taken the year to work out what I want it to be like. The job continues to be to advocate for things that are important in Rotorua. You'll have seen recently I've been quite vocal on the closure of the Rotorua Rescue Helicopter, and today is the 2nd of November. We're filming this. Yesterday, the 1st of November, it closed after 30 or 40 years, and I just think that's a travesty. It's wrong. It's the only base in the country to close. The other thing we're hearing is our race course could close also, and although not a huge number of people go to the races, it creates a lot of revenue and a lot of jobs. It is quite important to us, and so we'll continue to sort of fight those causes for Rotorua, but at the same time to recognise things that are doing well, and to support them. There have been things the new government have done that I strongly disagree with. There have been things they've done that I agree with and I've voted for, and it's about taking each on its merit.
Kia ora, Todd. Now, how do you see the future of offering free fees for first-year students as what is the ongoing success for our students who sign up for under this scheme?
Yeah. So the scheme at the moment means in your first year of study, you don't have to pay fees. There are already a number of institutions around the country that were offering that anyway, but now this has been rolled out. There's a couple of things here. I believe strongly in offering those who are not able easily to go off and study more, who want to. We've got to find ways for them to do that, and so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But we also have to realise that this is taxpayers' money, so every student at Toiho Mai has at some stage a job or will have a job, and you also do. It's your taxes that are being used for that. And the reason the government gave was to increase the number of students studying, to increase opportunity. Unfortunately, in the first year, that hasn't been the case. The number of students studying has fallen. So it remains there. It's on the books, and that first year is in place. Thereafter, it's the second year. People can have student loans because if they need the help to continue studying, they should. And those student loans are interest-free as long until they go to the workforce. Sorry, they're always interest-free if you remain in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So the point about this is it's the cost of the student loan scheme for the country, for the taxpayer, over about 4 years is almost $3 billion. And if it doesn't drive more students to study than would have without it there, then the taxpayer has a right to ask whether the money is being used as well as it needs to be. To my view, and a lot of students I've been speaking to in high school who want to go on and study, they're unsure of the cost, they're concerned about the student loan and so on. The difference between those that can study but choose not to is not often the actual cost of your study for the year, although it can be, because your student loan can deal with that. They and the institutions who probably know best about this tell me the best way to help people to go and study more who maybe are finding it difficult is around a bit of the cost of living and some of the other support that's available to them. And that's something that in opposition I certainly want with my colleagues to explore, to come up with very good policies that make it easier for those who are going to find it harder to study to get there. One final thing. So my son is going off to university next year. He won't have to pay first year. And so he finds that as a good thing. But the thing is, with my job and with my wife's job, we can afford to support my son to study. I would much rather the money that is being given to him so he doesn't have to pay the first year goes to someone else that can't afford to study, and even with the first year will find it difficult. That would be a better use of that for us in our circumstance, and those are the type of things I think we need to focus on in the next few years, because there will still be a lot of people who are not studying that want to, that should be, that can't afford to. And my son and other people's children not having to pay that first year is not helping them, if they're not there.
Kia ora, because this is a very big issue, because even for students in my age group, we're only given a certain amount of allowance that we can go for, because we're only allowed to 120 weeks and then it's stopped.
Yeah.
So, something like that should be addressed too, because us as mature students, we shouldn't be disadvantaged. Like, if the younger ones get that much, why can't we?
Well, so what the current policy of the government is that it's only your first year. So I've already studied, even though the policy wasn't there before, I couldn't do it again. I know of a young lady who's, since she left school, been working at McDonald's, and as part of that she's got level 5 credits, which is great. But she won't get her first year free, because those level 5 credits she's got as a result of working at McDonald's disqualify her. So there's never a perfect policy, and that's the point. But what we have to be, from the point of view of decision makers, charged with spending taxpayers' money, because the government doesn't have its own money. The only money the government has, it takes from people, and whether you're a student now or not, at some point you will be a taxpayer, and at that point you will want to make sure that the money the government takes off you when you work is used well, because you're the one doing the work. If you're the one doing it, you should keep more of it than someone else should get. rather than spreading it everywhere, often
Yeah.
the better thing is to focus on those who have the most need, and you
Yeah.
get the better outcome. So there's a lot of work
There's
to
a
do
lot
around
to
that.
it, because even with the fluctuation of numbers of students coming to Polytech or university has dropped, and we're still now looking which is the best way to encourage our students to come here.
Yeah, well, so it's a multitude of things. Some students are finding their way to the workforce because there are more
Yeah.
jobs available. Others are going off and doing different types of training. When I said my boy
Yeah.
who's training to be a builder,
Yeah.
there are many paths through to a successful future that people can lead. But for those who want to come and study but are not able to,
Yeah.
that's where our focus and government resource should be.
Should be.
Shouldn't necessarily be spread as widely as it is. However, the system's there, and I encourage people to use it.
Kia ora. My next question for you, Todd, is what do you see is the future for polytechnics here in New Zealand and student associations?
Well, I think the polytechs and technical institutes have play a very important role, and therefore have a strong future. Not everybody has to go off and away to a university. Not
Yeah.
everyone has to go and do a full-time course over 3 years
Yeah.
to get a degree. So just got to make sure the balance is right in the courses that are being offered, and that they are relevant to the workforce. And from time to time, I've had employers say, well, the problem with some of the tertiary education in New Zealand is you'll come out with a qualification, but it doesn't quite line up with the skills that we need in the workforce,
in the
and it
workforce.
frustrates them. I've
Yeah.
always said, well, the institution has an obligation to make sure they're training people with the skills that the workforce can use, but those employers and the industry must also join with the polytechnics to talk about the type of skills that they need. It's a
Yeah.
two-way street. Look, Toi Ohomai, I think, does an incredible job.
Yes.
There is always room for improvement in everything that we do, and we've gone through a few years of transition as a number of campuses, Bay of Plenty and Rotorua and others have come together. It's worth continuing to put effort into that,
Yeah.
because the outcome for the students that come here has to be a very, very positive one.
It has to
We
be.
also need to make sure that the mix of courses that are available meet not only the requirements of all students, but at the same time meet the requirements of where the jobs are going
Where
to
the
be in the
jobs
local
are,
and the wider
yeah.
economy. I think they do a really good job of that, but we've got to keep
Yeah.
making sure that that Toi Ohomai and other institutions remains relevant. And in far as Pulse is concerned, you too do a good job. I would argue that it hasn't always been the case. If I go back to when I first became an MP 10 years ago, I'm not sure that the equivalent of Pulse was as responsive to the needs and requirements of the students as they are today. And there have been a number of changes that have helped drive that. But ultimately it's the people who are involved that will make sure that student unions provide a good service. And I'm firmly of the view, if students don't see value in a service, they shouldn't have to pay for it.
They should
Now,
have to pay
I also
for it.
accept students don't like to pay for lots of things, so you've got to get the balance a little bit right. But ultimately, I think Pulse, from what others tell me, not my opinion, others tell me,
Yeah.
does a good job, and the services you provide are relevant to students and they value it. And to answer your question, the future of student unions is in the hands of the student unions themselves.
Yes.
If they remain relevant and providing a service that is needed, then they will always be there. But if they're not doing those things, then ultimately the students are the ones who will decide, because they won't come in and they
Yeah.
won't avail themselves of that student.
True.
And so, I think the balance is about right at the moment, but you got to continue to make sure that you deliver value,
Value for our
of
students.
not value of money, value of service to
Service for
students
our student by
themselves.
students.
That's
yeah.
right.
Because that's what we do here at Student Pulse. We provide the services student by student,
It's good.
and we understand what they're going through because we are a student ourselves,
Yeah.
and we understand where they're coming from. Because here at Student Pulse we also have all our international students
Yep.
coming in, which is good.
Yeah,
We're having a good variety of everybody coming in,
it's great.
and we love it. Now our next one is, how do you feel about providing more accommodation for students here in Rotorua and Tauranga?
Well, I think you need a mix of accommodation, because not all students will want just exactly what is provided.
No.
So if you take the example of many universities, they'll have halls of residence. often just for the first year that somebody goes and studies.
Yeah.
And in some cases the student can stay for another year, but they go and find their own thing. So you do need quite a mix of that. I don't know that I'd like to see a system where the institution itself is the only one providing the accommodation, even if it's just that first year. The reason for that, it's a huge amount of resource,
Yes.
and then it means that all of that resource, that extra money, is not being ploughed directly into the institution and the studies. But having said that, I've always also been a firm believer that a tertiary institution that takes fees from students has an obligation to make sure that they do well, and in some cases that will also be to make sure that there is suitable and a suitable accommodation available, and in some cases that's owned by the institution. Others they reach agreement with private providers or others. So there'll be a mix of ways that could be done. So I'm very open to the idea and exploring it. I'm not sure the best solution is always for for Toi Oho Mai to have to put tens and tens of millions of dollars into accommodation itself, when what we really want them to do is be training young people and
get them into the
put them back into the workforce with the skills that society needs. But I do think that institutions have an obligation to make sure that students are cared for and they are safe. And if anybody thinks that's not happening, they should ring me up as their MP, and we will see what's going on.
Kia ora. So our last question, Todd, thank you for all this information you've given us. It's been really valuable. Do you have any teacher that brings back memories for you?
Three. May I say three? Three.
Yes, you can.
The first one is Chris Grinter, who is the principal of Rotorua Boys High School, who in my very first year at Wesley College, the boarding school, he was the deputy principal. And he was a very, very strict teacher. Very strict. But, at an all-boys school, that's not a bad thing. But I remember in that year, he was quite a role model. The second is, I don't remember the person's name, and it's probably good that I don't. My woodwork teacher in fourth form, which must be year 10 at Tohara College, and because he strapped me, he's the only teacher that ever did. That's why I remember him, right? And by the way, if he's watching this, what he said I didn't do. To this day, it wasn't me, but he do owe me one. Anyway, the third one was actually when I first went to high school. So, when you first arrive at high school, it can be very, very confusing. It's such a step up. Just as the first year for students out of high school in Toi Oho Mai can be very confusing also. It's such a big change. And my form teacher or class teacher was called Miss Spearman. And I remember her saying that I mucked around too much. If I didn't do my work, she said, you're funny and you talk all the time, you muck around too much, you don't do your work, you won't amount to anything. And I don't know whether I've amounted to anything, but thanks for the advice, I did what Miss Spearman said.
But you're doing very well today. So, those are all good things, because we all have our fond memories of our teachers. And would you agree that, even if our students fall out of school, like at a high school, if they get expelled and that, do you agree that they can come back to Polytech and carry on the education?
Look, there just has to be a pathway, absolutely. Young people will make mistakes. Our job as parents, as teachers, is to guide them. We've got to realise that they won't get everything right.
No.
They often won't get everything right. The high school years are very, very confusing. People, minds, their arrangements, their bodies go through very, very big change. And so I would hate to think of any situation where somebody's done something wrong, got in trouble, they're expelled, and that's it. And the reason for that is, if we're saying to them they shouldn't give up on themselves, we as a society shouldn't be sending a signal we're giving up on them.
That's right.
There'll be lots of situations where it's not appropriate or it's not possible for them to remain in the school because they could, disrupt others there, and they too have a right to study and be able to get on with their work. But no, I think there are opportunities there, and we're just got to find the very best ways for these pathways to get them there. Some cases, Toi Oho Mai and other institutions will be an opportunity for them. In some other situations, it may make matters worse. But I'll give you this one example. When I went to, when Kawara was in my electorate, and we were working away to say, how could we get more students from Kawara to come across here to study at the Wairaki then, Toi Oho Mai. And we worked through that because, just geographically they shouldn't be excluded. Anyway, there's a welding school there, and I went in and I sat there to talk to them all. And largely these were a lot of students who had dropped out of school, who weren't doing well, who had all sorts of challenging issues in their background. And some of them were having problems with reading and writing because they hadn't done well enough in school, or the school hadn't done well enough for them when they were there. And they were getting out of bed and they were turning up and they were taking pride in what they were doing, and they were learning. And for some of them, for the first time in their lives, were behaving and showing discipline. And when I challenged a couple of them as to why, they said, well, we don't have to sit there, looking at a screen and writing off a blackboard or whiteboard, but not only that, they were learning skills that they could see would put them in the workforce, and they were proud of what they were learning and would be proud to get a job as a welder. So there are lots of different ways to do that. We should never give up. We should never give up on young people.
So what do you think is the areas that students should really concentrate on for education, in the workforce, in the industry?
Well, look, I think to a large degree, whatever you have a passion and focus on that, whatever you think you want to do or your first job is today, absolute guarantee. When you're older, my age, you will have done lots of different things. I meet very few people who are still working in a profession they studied in all those years ago, because everything changes. I mean, to give you an example, I was at the Tipuki High School graduation last evening, and the principal in the speech put a video on, and he showed 22 years ago a cell phone, and it was a little flip-top one, and it was the first one that could send a text message but nothing else. No camera, you could phone people, and that's all. And then he showed 17 years ago the first iPhone. And the first iPhone is very much like the ones are now, and but how much technology jumped from that point, and it will continue to. And so a lot of what will happen now about the jobs of the future, technology will do many of them. But the most important thing that somebody should do if they're unsure is either be in education, work, or further study. If you're unsure, stay at school. If you're sick of school, which I can understand, find a job. To a degree, it doesn't matter what it is. If you don't want to go to get a job yet, come and study in a place like this. You just have to be doing something, because then the opportunities of the future will present themselves. If you're not doing one of those things, you might be surprised those opportunities don't come looking for you. You've got to go and look for them.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Todd, for coming along this afternoon. It's been really good what you shared with us. And if you need any support from Todd, you know where to find him. He's in the corner of Amohea and Fenton. Is Fenton's? No, not Fenton.
That's the other end. It's easier than that. Across from Spotlight, beside KFC. Forget the roads. You know where KFC is? I'm just round the corner.
Yeah. So
if you want to come and visit me, bring your KFC with you.
Oh, kia ora. Or you would provide it. No, thank you for coming along. And so if you need any support, Todd is always available to hear what you need support in. And thank you very much for this wonderful afternoon, and I'd like to wish you all the best in your mahi.
Thank you so
much. Kia ora. Thank you. Bye students. Ka kite. Kia ora. Thank you.